Hey, what's up, 8th graders? Catlin here helping you out with your practice problems for your math homework on lesson 8. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 missing triangle lengths to find. These are all right triangles, so we can use the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagorean theorem states that a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the legs, which would be like these two, and c is the hypotenuse, the one that's opposite of the right angle and the longest side. All right, so if we were doing this for h, um, and we were trying to find out what its value was worth, we're going to set up this equation. We're going to say that h squared plus 8 squared, because that's like the a or b, these are the a's and b's. When we add their squares up, we should get 100, or I'm sorry, 10 squared, which is 100. All right, so this will be the initial setup for h. All right, if we can find h from that equation and solve it, then we know how long h is. Now, I showed you guys in class today that some of you like to draw pictures of this as well. So I'm going to draw a picture for this one, and then the other ones I'm just going to use the algebra because the pictures take a while, it gets messy, and I'm going to erase it when I'm done. But if I take h and I square it, that would be like making this square right here. If I take 8 and I make a square out of it, that would be like drawing that square. And I need a little more space. If I take 10 and I make a square out of it, that would be the biggest square of them all, and that would come out this way. What we've learned is that if we take the square of the two smaller sides, the legs, and we add them together, we will get the square of the third one. So this is a visual of what's happening, okay? This is equal to h squared plus 8 squared, which in this case would be 64, 8 times 8. And it should equal 10 squared, c squared, which is 100 in this case. So algebraically, it looks like this, 64 and 100. And visually, it looks like this. So if I want to find the number that I have to add to 64 to get 100, I have to subtract 64 from 100 to find out what h squared is. And that gives me their difference, which is 36. And then the last step is to think of the number that you can multiply by itself to get 36. And in this case, it's a perfect square. So 6 is the number that we want. But in some cases, we won't know what that number is, and so we just put a square root around it. We could have written it like this. But these two things are the same. So for h, you could say 6 or root 36. All right. So I'm going to get rid of my visual here that I used for that explanation. And I'm just going to stick with the algebra for the rest of them because it is faster and it doesn't take up as much space. All right. So I'm going to do the rest of these down here at the bottom using just equations. So let me jump into the next one here. I'm going to do K. So K is an A leg and 6 is a leg. And this one right here is a hypotenuse. So we're going to take k squared, treat it like a. We're going to take 6 squared, treat it like a b. And then we're going to set that sum up equal to c squared, which is 6.5 squared, right? So in this setup, I'm going to keep the k squared the way it is. I'm going to square the 6 to get 36. And I got to square the 6.5. So I'm going to jump over to my calculator. And while that's loading, you can use the calculator on these problems. I wouldn't recommend using it for all of it because most of it is mental. But if you got to square something that's a decimal and you don't want to have to show that work on the side, you can jump this in there. This is 42.25. So 42.25. Now, to find out what k squared equals, just like we did over here, we're going to have to find their difference because this one's the biggest, this one's the in-between, and there's going to be a smaller one, right? So we find their difference, and I already got it on my calculator, so I'm going to subtract it, that answer, by 36. And 6.25 is my answer for k squared. So k squared is 6.25. But remember, that's the area of k getting squared. We just want k's length, not its square. So we got to take the square root of 6.25 to find that answer. Now, fortunately for us here, 625 is a perfect square in some ways, to an extent. It's not one that we would know as a times fact. but it does come out nice. The square root of 6.25 is 2.5. So 2.5 is another acceptable answer for K. I would accept square root of 6.25 at this point. We haven't done a lot of perfect squares yet, so these are equivalent. All right, moving right along. I think I'm going to do one more, and then I will allow you guys to do the other two on your own. I feel like I've shown you enough examples, you'll be okay. I'm going to do the 2 and the 5 here. Actually, you know what? No, I'll do this one because you haven't seen one with a square root yet. That way you can have an example of that one too. All right, so I'm going to do n. N is an A or B. It's a leg. 10 is the hypotenuse. Root 10 is another leg. So I would set this one up as, I'm going to say n squared is my A squared. And root 10 is going to be my B squared. So root 10 squared equals my C squared, which is 10. And then I'm going to make squares out of them, but n squared stays the same. If I square a 10 by 10 square, root 10 times root 10 is just 10. And 10 times 10 is 100. So this is where I land. And I'm going to have to subtract these two to find n squared, since I knew the hypotenuse. And when I subtract those two, I get 90. And to find what two numbers can multiply to give me 90 that are the same, I have to take the square root of 90. And since that is not a perfect square, 81 and 100 would be around, it's probably going to be about 9.5 would be my guess. But we're going to leave it as root 90. So far we did n, we did h, and we solved for k as well. And you guys' job on your own in the space that I haven't used down here is to find p and m, which I think you should be able to do at this point with the practice that I've done for you. And that will be two that I'll probably be the ones grading whenever I do it on Friday. So get that practice in, and good luck. Don't forget to write what p equals and what m equals. Okay, I'll be looking for those, and I'm expecting you to do those on your own. Okay, so you should have the homework I did with you, and then practicing a couple more on your own. Later, guys.